away.
There you go. Okay, Nikolai, would you do us a favor and start us off with an opening prayer? Nikolai?
Our Father who are in heaven, please bless our meeting and lead us in our devotion, in our work for the all benefits of brotherhood. Amen.
Thank you, Nikolai. Again, I want to welcome everybody to the February Fireside Chat. And I have the great honor and pleasure to introduce you all to Most Worshipful Robert Davis, who is the sitting Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Oklahoma. He's a past secretary of the Valley of Guthrie, Oklahoma, I believe is correct. And probably has tons of other titles, but I've asked him to be our guest speaker today. And so I will turn it over to Bob for his presentation. Take it away, sir.
Well, thank you, most puissant Grand Master and brethren all. It's a real honor for me to be here. It's good to see that there's a few Oklahoma companions that have signed on just to kind of keep me in check, but it gives me a sense of comfort to see them here. So I thank my Oklahoma brothers for signing on. I'm going to give a kind of a formal talk this afternoon, since you are recording this, and since I always think that these forums are designed for us to think about some things and learn about some things, and so I decided that what I was going to talk about today is the hero's quest for the secrets of the cryptic rite. And it is universally agreed that the ritual ceremonies of Freemasonry represent the mythic model of the hero's journey. It defines a series of stages along the path to personal change and growth, and we all know that. And it begins with a call to adventure, a challenge to do something different, change our ways, find out what has meaning to our life, indeed, what the real meaning is in our life. And by crossing the threshold of the sacred space of a Masonic lodge, we accept the call or the need to change. Now, we don't realize it in the moment that this is our entry into a world between worlds. And there will be a lot of thresholds that we must then overcome to answer the call. There's a lot of work required on ourselves to change. There are a lot of new discoveries to be made in the process of our own awakening. And the work we are referring to is inner work. And we get through it by accepting the fact that we all need some help to make this kind of inner change in our life. We acknowledge that we don't know everything after all. We need the guidance of others who have gone the way before us. And you see, it is the community of men who must ultimately entice our hero to follow the journey to self-improvement and meaning, because to be a man, we must be affirmed into the community of men. We simply cannot overemphasize the significance of male association when it comes to discovering and molding the mature masculine soul. And so the need for fraternalism is and always will be the number one psychological need in men. Now, the fundamental thing we need to know about the hero's journey is that it is always meant to change us or transform us in some significant way. It moves us from one point in our life to another. And the hero's journey always begins with the call to the experience of initiation. And of course, we all experience a lot of initiations in our life. In a real sense, we never quit being initiated. And some obvious examples every man can relate to might include getting a driver's license, leaving home after high school, getting married, getting our first job after college, having our first child, the death of our parents. And all of these events change us in some extraordinary way. We are never the same after we experience all of them. And the reason we are changed by these experiences is that every one of them awaken our consciousness. Each of them move us to a higher state of being. So when a candidate knocks on the door of a Masonic lodge, he is standing at the threshold of his own consciousness. And beyond that door, he should find a temple of enlightenment. And everything he does therein, every symbol he encounters, every pause he takes, every process he witnesses through the degrees of Masonry from that point forward relates to his increased awareness, his levels of consciousness, and his transformation as a more enlightened human and spiritual being. The late brother Kirk McNulty perhaps defined it best in his wonderful book, The Way of the Craftsman, that the craft communicates two notions. First, that mankind is made in the image of God, and second, that each of us reflects the structure of the universe. And this correspondence between the universe and man, between God and man, is the basis of all Masonic instruction. It is in such private and magical conclaves that each of us is introduced to our own path to self-improvement. And what we make of this experience becomes our rite of passage. It determines the difference we will make in ourselves, in others, and in the world. And we cannot begin to understand our own fraternal history without understanding manhood. Until only very recently, across the entire span of history, manhood has been at the center of life and progress. Men have always held to the notion that the future depends on them, that deep within their own receptacles of manhood, there rests an inherent ability to sire or mentor great men who will become the heroes of sons yet unborn. And as men, it is our quiet longing that even our own sons might become, or at least associate with such heroes. But, as you know, we no longer live in a man's world. Gender roles have become increasingly difficult to define. We are no longer formed in distinct molds. Manhood is constantly under siege today from feminists, religious zealots, political and gender stereotyping, spousal independence, ethnic diversity, political correctness, media and movie male bashing, interest-driven legislative and court decisions, and the regrettable but often publicized inappropriate behavior of the worst examples of manliness among us. And the result is that the meaning of manhood must now be sought out and determined by each man in his own experience. So regardless of the stresses we must endure, the fact remains is we are still men. And consequently, it is more important than ever that we be about the consciously understanding our roles as men and taking responsibility for our actions in the world. No matter how stubborn the challenge, we know that how we play out our role as men in our own time will largely determine the kind and quality of life that succeeding generations will have. Freemasonry is an organization that instructs men how to be in control of their lives in conscious and responsible ways. It was created to mold men into icons of virtue and morality, to fashion them in healthy and positive ways so that their very actions will exhibit virtue and moral integrity in the larger culture of men. In a very real sense, Freemasonry's traditional role in this journey to mature masculinity is now more important than ever. We live in a time where adolescent boys no longer have a grounded and effective passage to manhood, where young men in adulthood are still not sure why they are men, are not sure that they are men. The traditional rites of passage from boyhood to manhood, which have always been a key for survival in human history, has been absent. In fact, our modern society has largely eliminated them. We live in a culture where young men no longer know the rites of passage, how one gets to be a man, and what being a man is supposed to look like. And the central problem for the male transition to manhood is that there are no formal rites through which young people can express the yearnings of their soul that will usher them from childhood to manhood. And in our contemporary American experience, we no longer honor the inner journey of the wisdom quest like our indigenous ancestors, or help young men cultivate the wisdom of their dreams as did the ancient Greeks. There's no one entity in their young life, or no one entity in their young life has taken on the responsibility of intentionally establishing the essential marks of passage from one social role to another. As a result, by the time our young men leave adolescence, they've lost touch with themselves. They approach the world of adulthood with a soul that has been undernourished. Yet what matters to each man's soul is authenticity. A man must know, is this me, my path, my life, or am I acting out someone else's dream for me? When there are no perceived guideposts, or when some culturally accepted norm for transmission involving intergenerational males is not in place and has not in place over multiple generations, how does a guy know if he's made it or not? What does he use as a test of validation? I can assure you, my brothers, that a male who is privately uncertain of his manhood will also be uncertain in his behavior. In Freemasonry, the reason we provide a rite of initiation is that it puts closure on the process of becoming a man. The Masonic experience serves as both a safe meeting place and a healthy means of communication for men. Our membership gives us a sense of belonging and identity as social creatures. Our ritual cements our commitment to the fraternity. Our experience of ritual provides instruction in the images, allegories, and myths that touch upon the archetypes of manhood and communicate our shared values, principles, and ideals. Our instruction addresses our higher emotional and intellectual needs and transcends the whole range of human experience and expression. It is holistic and experiential, which means that we experience through our human senses, and our mind is engaged in forming concrete memories and connections with the images, words, symbols, and ideas being communicated. To carry these principles of instruction into our broader lives is to live as if life is kind of a ritual itself in which everything has the potential to communicate something of deep significance. And finally, our initiatory experience distinguishes us from the rest of the community and marks our consequence among Masons. It is our rite of passage. It is the turning point in the psychological development of a brother's life. It is the art of facilitating development, maturity, and transformation in the ways of men in each of us. Freemasonry's greatest purpose is to assist men in transforming their psyches and relationships into wiser, stronger, and more beautiful reflections of the great architect's design for the human soul and society. And my brothers, this is the landscape of a well-constructed and fulfilled life. Now, I've provided all of this prefatory information to lead me to this point. There must be an initiation for any of these kinds of eventualities to occur. Initiation is that moment between from whence we came and whither we are going. As a member of our tradition, the only thing that each of us can do is aid, support, or facilitate the work to be accomplished. But the transformation of the initiate can only be realized gradually within himself as he passes stage by stage through the different degrees offered him, knowing that his success in the journey will ultimately lead him to his inner identity with the divine. Our role as exemplars to our brothers and the instruction of our rituals is to lead him to the inner nature of his very being. And we call this aspect of the journey the secret tradition. It begins in the middle chamber of the Fellowcraft degree, and it ends in the secret master, degree of the cryptic rite. The degrees from the master mason to the secret master represent a journey inward into the caverns of one's consciousness to discover the highest nature of his being. Now, without revealing how the path is taken within the rubric of our rituals, I will say that every man is engaged in the labor of building his own spiritual temple. The work of gaining divine knowledge is labor of the earth. And the secret chambers within which this work is carried out informs him that no man can ever know all truth while he makes his earthly sojourn, regardless of the path of faith and reason he takes. And even when he knows where to look for truth, he can only receive a substitute or a portion of it during his earthly life. He must come to the divine master to receive his reward. His earthly labor cannot be consummated except by the acquisition of divine truth, and such a reward always remains partially covered in this life, for the temple he is building is the temple of this life, in the hope that the foundations of the life he is now building, it will become the temple of a future life. In our first temple or life, the truth cannot be found. We must be content with its substitute. But we also realize that we have at least the potential of becoming a suitable substitute for divine truth. There is present a holy of holies within each of us. And no matter how weak we may become or how often we err, the Spirit of God is not far away from our conscious mind. When we unite with the highest aspects of our being, that is our sacred life, through spiritual thought, study, and insight, we begin to confirm to the idea of the divine will, corresponding to perfect thought, perfect action, and perfect behavior. Such is the tradition, the transition from the profane to the initiate to the divine being. We come and we ask. We seek the truth and we find it. We knock and the door is opened unto us. Now, the secret tradition of Freemasonry is highlighted in the Select Master degree of the cryptic rite. The historical object of the degree is to commemorate the deposit of an important secret or treasure within a secret vault located between the Second Temple. So secret, in fact, that even the workmen engaged in the building did their secret work without ever being openly recognized as a separate group of workers. Their job and their existence were unknown. Now, the esoteric meaning here is that secret master work in secrecy and silence, that they may prepare and preserve the sacred deposits of truth until such time as these may be revealed or come into full revelation. From the perspective of faith, the idea is that the work which men do now is not for the present alone. Their labors should be such that when their work in the present life is finished, the grand architect will reward them in the second temple of eternal life. Now, the essential teaching has to do with the path one must take to earn such a reward. And that takes us to the secret vault tradition in Freemasonry. We make numerous references to the mystic center or secret chamber in Freemasonry. We first encounter it in the Fellowcraft degree with our journey to the middle chamber, but we are not told what we are there to find. In the Master Mason degree, we are searching for the lost secrets, and we know they are to be found in the Sanctum Sanctorum or a sacred center, but again, we can't find the center because we're not told where to look. Yet the center of which we speak is the same place for both the Fellowcraft and the Master Mason. In craft masonry, this center is presumed to be the point within the circle. And it is the same center by means of which we hope to find the vault and its precious content in the chapter and council degrees of the York Rite. It is the same center in which is a sacred treasure is revealed in the Royal Arch or the Holy of Holies or center of consecrated sacredness. But it remains unknown because it is an ineffable idea. The journey to divine truth never ends, for it is the journey of the rebirth of the human race, the self-revelation of God. Thus, in all of Masonry, it is the passage or journey that must have the most meaning to us. It is the circumambulations in the lodge, the passage of the winding stairs, the journey to the middle chamber, the journey through the 9 arches, where each arch or cavern contains the attributes of God which must integrate into our own soul. Thus, in the cryptic degrees, the vault symbolizes the human in search for the essential reality and attributes of God. The Mason, like the select master, accesses the knowledge of the divine truth only by seeking ever deeper within his inmost self, his soul. It is the divine tool given to man's nature for the purpose of God realization. In Masonry, all such symbolism refers to a divine level of consciousness. My brothers, the journey for every man is both a descent and an ascent at the same time. We must descend into the center of our own being in order to discover that divine spirit within us, wherein we will behold God in the mirror of existence. And there will be then, as there was in the beginning, only God. So that's my formal presentation for the General Grand Council to consider today.
Thank you very much, Most Worshipful. It was an excellent presentation. I'll open it up for anybody who may have any questions of Most Worshipful Davis. This tends to be a pretty quiet group. Anybody got any questions?
No questions, but a comment.
Oh, please.
I thought it was great. I read part of this in a different setting of why we're having trouble finding men. We need to stop looking for those men. We need to start looking for the people that haven't reached manhood yet, but are of the age to enter.
Yeah, as I was listening, I was having thoughts on, how so many young boys are recruited by gangs and such, and they are the ones that set their moral compasses and teach them their version of right and wrong, and give them their initiations into manhood, but they tend to be the ones that society abhors. And I think that makes our mission just that much more important, and why organizations like DMLA are so important as well in the world.
Yeah. I think it's also important to know that there is a vast difference between becoming an adult and becoming a man.
Yes.
In study after study, it's been shown that becoming a man's a whole different game than becoming an adult. And in counseling sessions that psychologists have, and men's retreat studies, which reveal male-to-male conversations over the past couple of decades, we have learned that social and legal milestones alone do not make the man. And men will acknowledge that they never felt that such things as getting a driver's license, playing on a sports team, being allowed to drink or vote made them a man. There's even a lot of confusion among men if participating in risky ventures, such as using drugs or engaging in indiscriminate sex or fighting on the streets, or even engaged in conflict on the field of battle makes one a man. These events are not the criteria for manhood, because becoming a man requires a deep emotional and spiritual transition. It's an internal shift that does not come from an arbitrary bestowing of any kind of legal rights, nor does it come from a man's physique itself. So even under the very best circumstances, males face an enormous challenge in making this transition. And I don't know of any other organization in the world that focuses on the journey to manhood other than Freemasonry. The whole basis of our ritual is centered on trying to provide all of the guideposts in men that will enable them to weigh their judgments in life in such a way that they will learn how to become respected men of integrity in their communities. And my gosh, if the population of men out there in the profane world knew what our instruction was about and how it can help facilitate their growth as men, we'd have more members than we ever had.
I agree. Very well said. Any other question?
Yeah, I would like to say, while I can tend to agree with a lot of what the Most Worshipful Grandmaster has said, one piece, I think that being on the field of battle and the relationships that build up between, let's say, to use a trite phrase, men in the foxhole, I think that is the beginning of the journey into manhood from being a boy. And that's why we had such great success in recruiting members after World War I, World War II, and Korea. That particular, if you want to call it a precursor or a pre-requirement to becoming a Mason, does not exist anymore. And even in the military today, it's not the same thing. My generation was Vietnam. You went for a year, you came back, you never really established the beginnings of a relationship with other men who were going through the same kinds of emotional developmental processes that you were on the field of battle. I just finished watching last night Pacific. And before that, of course, were the others, Band of Brothers and things like that. And the whole last episode was dedicated to the people that came home and how they then reacted to life away from the battlefield, away from their friends, away from this process that had started to move them from boys to men. And I think that's one of the problems we have today, is that this precursor experience to Freemasonry is not available in any way, shape, or manner. That's just my thought on it. I'll go back to being quiet.
If I might, Steve, you bring it to a point, and I think that everything that is being said, what you just said about what joining the military did, I would put forth, I would postulate that it puts a perspective on life where you come to understand that what is important, or you come to understand what is important. A lot of people in today's generation, I've got 4 girls going through school. They have friends. And they don't have, there's no sense of a base importance. Everything is a reflection of what the latest TikTok video said, or what the latest YouTube video said, or what their friends are saying. And it's the external prioritization takes away from it. And I think that the military is the one exception from, I think that the military is the best example that Most Worshipful Bob gave in his iteration of things that don't actually prepare. They're actually where people go to look for something because they know something's missing. And the military is the place where you might actually get to the point where you start understanding what you're actually looking for. But all the rest of them, it's a slippery slope, and you get so caught up in the best of who cares.
I would agree with you, and I think that one of the greatest problems, or not problems, but one of the greatest negative impacts that we've had, particularly on American society, is when they did away with the draft. And that brought, basically it brought everybody to the door, whether you were rich, poor, black, white, green, purple, or orange, brought everybody to the same door, and everybody had an experience that to a certain extent united them. I look at Israel, where every individual, man or woman, with certain unique exceptions, has to give 2 years of service to their country. And it creates a society, I think, that is to a large extent concerned about other members of the society. And that's another one of the basic precursors to taking the initiatory experience in the Freemasons. I wish I go back and look at the fact that when I was 21, I became a Mason. Why? Because my father was a Mason and my grandfather was a Mason. I didn't really understand at that point in time what it meant. It's only as I've aged and broadened my own understanding of myself that I have found things in masonry that are just overwhelming to an individual. The friendships, the service, the activity, and it really has. Now that I'm almost in my dotage, as our ritual might say, I have found a deeper meaning in everything that. All of the experiences that I've gone through, and I can look back over non-Masonic periods of time in my life and can look at them from a better point of view, I guess. And that's basically I guess the period along it, maybe it's taken me just 30 or 40 or 50 years to actually become a man. I don't know, but it certainly has increased my understanding. It has increased my, I guess the current term is wokeness. And I'm enjoying things now that I never enjoyed before. And it just, well, I don't know what else to say.
No, very well said. Richard Reddick, brother, you had a comment?
Yes, thank you. Most worshipful, I've got kind of two questions to ask. The first one, with the idea in mind that Freemasonry is the handmaiden of religion. And as we look at the third degree, there's a part in there where our Grandmaster H.A. says to the first ruffian, wait until the temple is completed, and then if you are found worthy, you shall receive them, otherwise you cannot. There's two prerequisites there. There's the structure, the temple must be completed, and then worthiness. And we're talking about spiritual things here. And the word you used, ineffable. As we build our temple, in your opinion, what are some of the spiritual things, spiritual qualities that would make an aspiring master mason worthy for those secrets or that self-discovery, or the lack of such attributes that would disqualify him from that discovery?
Well, I think that, and one of the things that's so important to me about Freemasonry, thinking about all the rituals that we experience, in almost every degree, we face these oppositions. And most of the time we're told what the oppositions are. Sometimes we sort of have to, they're implied. We have to discover them ourselves. But in the process of building a spiritual temple is the process of reconciling all of the opposites within us. And that means that we have to deal with the baggage of our own life. We have to deal with the fact that some of us come out of, backgrounds that have created some real terror for us, abusive backgrounds. A lot of us came out of parents who were divorced. And so it was hard for us to have an important male role model in our life. Some of us came out of the terrors and the frightful experiences that they in fact had in combat. And all of these things pushes them to a challenge in their life that has to be reconciled. And a lot of men, rather than facing the baggage of their life, they repress the baggage of their life. And now sometimes they must repress the baggage of their life in order to give them some sense of stability. But the fact is, the baggage never goes away. And at some point in time, when we're more mature, when we know how to weigh things from a different perspective than we may have earlier on, we need to revisit those things that have caused us damage in our own life and determine what do we do to overcome that. And of course, what we do to overcome that is we take on virtue. And you can't take on virtue without knowing what the virtues are. And of course, Freemasonry does a great job in describing for us something like, when you go through all the degrees of the Blue Lodge, the Scottish Rite, and New York Rite, you'll discover that you have been instructed in over 100 virtues. And so we literally have to overcome ourselves. And the biggest challenge that men face is this challenge of overcoming themselves, and they'll never do it without looking at their life from a new perspective, from the perspective of the man they want to become, not the man that they have been. And because you must overcome yourself before you can affirm yourself. And once you affirm yourself and become comfortable in your own skin, then everything changes about you. You actually know what peace and harmony feels like. You know what balance means in your life. You understand the nature of equilibrium. And so whenever you start moving, away from that pendulum, and that pendulum will swing back and forth through all the challenges you have in your life. But as you take on maturity, you know how to bring that pendulum back in to the center of your being. And so that's a process. You don't overcome that in just a few months. And you also don't overcome it without awakening consciousness. And the quest that of the degrees of the Blue Lodge is this awakening consciousness. In the entered apprentice degree, we learn about what living a good life looks like, what being a good citizen looks like, what stability in the structure of our lives look like. And in the fellowcraft degree, we actually make that journey of our own experience through the winding stairs, where we evaluate what we know from the culture in which we came, from the families that we lived in, from the education we've received, from the information of our faith system that we've received. And we acknowledge that some of the things that we've learned and been told weren't necessarily right. And so we have to learn how to reprogram ourselves. And that's what we do when we make the flight of the winding stairs. And then as we move into the middle chamber, we start this journey into our inner consciousness. The very first thing that we encounter are the ruffians in our life. And one of the mistakes that we often make when we're dealing with the ruffians, we assume that they're somebody else's ruffians and that they're bad guys. And, they got caught, they were brought to justice, and therefore the tale ended and all is well. But those ruffians are the aspects of our own being that we have not overcome. And so we have to spend a great deal of time and in a sense, the higher degrees investigate those ruffian elements and help us discover what those elements have been in our own life. And they give us the tools to reconcile them so that we don't carry that baggage forward with us. So we always have this opportunity in Freemasonry to leave the baggage of our past life in the preparation room, or to leave it in the pillars as we pass the pillars in the fellowcraft degree. But the point is, we have to get beyond that before we can affirm ourselves. And so all of the instruction in Freemasonry, once we learn that we have to overcome ourselves, has to do with all the guideposts and the virtues and the moral principles that we can then take on and decide to live with those things as a part of our consciousness, rather than the things that misdirected us in earlier years. And as long as we stay focused on that, we always and continuously move towards harmony in our lives. And when we reach that state of perfection that the grand architect would desire for us to achieve, we're comfortable with who we are. And nothing much upsets us after we reach that point of maturity. And that point of maturity only occurs by this inner journey we take and the reflections that we bring out of that in order to change us as a more perfect human being.
Thank you, Most Worshipful. I've got a second question for you. You've talked about manhood and virtue this afternoon. If you would, can we play fantasy masonry for just a moment? Imagine that every man in this nation was a Freemason and was a good one and was on the path of wisdom and virtue. How would that spill over to the fairer sex in our nation?
Well, oh boy, that's a loaded question.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I think, when we think about the meanings of the pillars, where one pillar represents the masculine aspects of our being, and the other pillar represents the feminine aspects of our being. And what we want to take from the feminine aspects of our being is the nurturing qualities, the qualities of compassion, the qualities of unconditional love, and so it's the fairer sex that actually enables us to improve ourselves, because we take on their genetic qualities into our genetic qualities. And so our aggressiveness, our all of those attributes that relate to masculinity are balanced by the virtues that are brought to us from our feminine side. And so if we're good men, we simply complement we complement what the best of our other selves, the ladies in our life bring to us, and therefore we make their life better. We become more one with them, which is the way it should be, because we're all becoming one with God. We all have that spirit of the divine within us. And so, hard question.
Hey, Mark, can you mute your mic? Mark McGee. Thank you, sir. Any other questions?
I don't have a question, Most Puissant, but for Most Worshipful, I just wanted to run this by him as another construct to come for the Select Master degree. In most of our rituals, the dialogue is between the three: Solomon, Hiram of Tyre, and Hiram Abiff. And Solomon exemplifies the Solomonic rule of three, whereby there's these rules that we made as a group, and we're going to enforce them as a group. And he looks for counsel in this situation. He looks for compassion. He's trying to find a solution. And the dialogue goes through that process. If Solomon had done it all on his own, without looking to the divine for wisdom, or to, in this case, those that represent that divine wisdom, in consulting with King Hiram, who says, well, we could do this, but, our number is but 27 and our number is full. Well, then Hiram Abiff, who must have been the lawyer from heaven, comes in and says, but we can do this because actually the guilty party is a Hishar. It's that guy sleeping over there. And I think that there's so many aspects to the cryptic degrees that even we as cryptic Masons, we let these go by. We just kind of let it be. Well, that was humorous that guy was sleeping, and then he's taken out and executed. Now, in one sense, he represents the fourth kind of evil. With the three ruffians we know about from our Master Mason degree and our Scottish Rite degrees, they represent the progression of evil. They go from a crime of passion to a crime of intent. The intentional, willful and knowledge. I'm going to kill this guy, which is what the third ruffian does, and it just progresses in most of our rituals. A Haishar represents the fourth kind of sin, indifference and neglect. He's got this royal position. He's in the Bible as being in the Old Testament. He's mentioned as a member of the household. He's the head of the household. He's the chief guy. He's the chief staff. And his duty for the Select of 27 is to guard the secret vault. That's his special duty. Well, it doesn't matter to him. His position matters, but the duty doesn't matter. So he's got his title, and he doesn't care about that because he thinks nobody can take it from him. It's a God-given right or a blood-given right, as I have often contended. So I think we see all these elements in the Select Master degree, and these are things that we need to work, do a better job of getting these things across to the candidates. I think that our cryptic ancestors did make those connections for people, and the Legend of Enoch, which ties into all this too. All these things were being brought to the forefront, and that's why cryptic Masonry survived. It's why it reinstated itself more or less in the United States and survived. And yeah, everybody around the world wants to copy it or claim they've got the right one, but I think we're on the right path. And I think what Bob has given us today gives us additional support for that. Bob, I'll take your reaction on some of that if you have one.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. The guard there in the Select Master, Select of the 27, he just slipped into the profane world, and he forgot his duties and role as one who was selected to create the space that deposited the secret treasure. To me, really, really powerful. I love Hiram's soliloquy in the Royal Master degree, where he doesn't tell the candidate, what the secret is, but he tells him, where to look for it. And one of the great insights I had when I went through the York Rite degrees was he was pointing at the place right to the west of the altar. And of course, who's right west of the altar? It's the candidate himself. He's actually telling us that the secret will be found within you. And I just, and that secret is found, of course, in the Holy of Holies that's within us, that spark of the divine that rests within us. And it will only be found if we choose to access that and then feel what that feels like when we have. Once you've made that contact and you understand that you can have this conversation with the divine anytime you want to, because the divine is an aspect of yourself, then it becomes always a matter of choice. And the guard, that was guarding the secret vault, he made a choice. And he did not have the consciousness that he was supposed to have to be in the position that he was in.
Yeah.
Pleasant, most worshipful. This is Jeff Bennett from Texas.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Hello?
Yeah, Jeff.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Thanks. I wanted to back up two comments from Bob and say my experience of going through those difficult times in your life and those struggles A few years ago, professionally, I was doing that. And one day I came in the house after work in a trying day, and I found out that there was nothing in my privileged life that I live in Texas, the United States of America, that a bowl of salsa and some corn chips and a cold beverage in about 15 or 20 minutes to get over myself wasn't the order of the day on a daily basis. So I'm not trying to make light of your comment. I'm trying to say I agree with you in total, as you and I have had another discussion. So thank you for letting me say that.
Yeah, you know, the comments that you and Bill made, Bob, you know, I've always believed that Masonry is very much a personal journey. We all walk our own path to the light, and we may share that path with others for a time, but eventually that path is going to diverge, and they're going to go off on their way, and you're going to go off on yours, and you're going to find someone else along the path to mentor you, to challenge you. But you know, I've always felt really sad for those that come into our craft and expect our craft to just provide them with, you know, some anointing, and therefore you are now enlightened, and you know, all things are known to you now. And that's not what we do, and that's not what Masonry is about, in my opinion. It is about that personal journey. It's about the personal growth. It's about smoothing your rough edges. And if we don't keep that first and foremost and keep ourselves grounded, and we are just a lonely traveler on the road of life, just like any other person. And I think that keeps us humble, it keeps us grounded, and allows us to understand the plight of our fellow human. And without doing that, I think we do a disservice to ourselves, and we do a disservice to Masonry.
I think Stephen Rubenstein made a comment in the chat that he suggested that we may be making a mistake by trying to recruit, you know, men 18 plus years rather than trying to recruit men that are 35 and above. I would point out that the Masonic Renewal Committee of North America, when they surveyed American males back in the early 90s, the results of that survey, and it was a statistically significant survey, but the most important result of that survey was that it turns out that fraternal association is the most important psychological need in men. But one of the other things that it pointed out, that the men who were most prepared to be Freemasons were men that had reached 35 years of age. And so at that time, they were encouraging us to focus on men who have already experienced their young adulthood, and that makes sense, of course. But because by the time we reach 35 years of age, most of us have already created stability in our occupations. We've been married, we have a family, and so we've learned an awful lot about our roles as being husbands and fathers and employees and that sort of thing during that first 15 years. But today, because the culture of males has changed so much, and we live in a society where so many items cloud a man's understanding of manhood, as I mentioned in the presentation. We have an opportunity to take in the young men just as they're beginning their adulthood, and we can actually help them avoid making a lot of mistakes that you just learn through the school of hard knocks. But we will never do that if we don't take on the role as their elders of providing quality mentorship to them. And if we have a weakness, one weakness we have is that the older men who are active in our lodges and all of our bodies don't understand their role as being a mentor to young men. And so they don't have the conversations that they could have, which could really change how a young man looks at his own perspective as he starts his adult passage. And so while the guys that are 35 years age and older are certainly a good fit for us, and we've got a lot of men entering the fraternity today upon retirement, but I don't think that we should not try to bring in the young men and become mentors and guides to them as older brothers in their life from the very beginning of their adult life. And because, I mean, lodges were always meant to be intergenerational just to serve that function, is to take the wisdom of our own life experience and pass it down to the next generation below us. And if we continue to do that, then we can continue to keep men on the path to mature masculinity.
Most worshipful, my experience has been, and I think it applies here. So I would ask if you have any comments on when I'm teaching a class. I always spent so much time on the introduction portion. I drove my program manager crazy, but my point was to find out from each person what they were doing there, how we could get somewhere. And what my takeaway is, it's a trite cliche, but the student has to want to learn. And I what I said about TikTok and all the other distractions, and what we've, and what I believe Steve was alluding to is, when you become 35 or 40, you're married. You've figured out where stability is in life. In other words, how do you inspire that I want to be the student? I want to know. How do you, because otherwise you're waiting for them to wake up one morning and realize, holy crap, I'm at this point in my life and I've got all these really important things and I need to pay attention. How do you get them to do that? And if you've got an answer, I'm listening, because I've got some teenagers.
Well, one thing we have in Freemasonry that you can't have in a classroom or almost any other setting is we are only supposed to take men into our ranks who are duly and truly prepared to be Masons. And so in a real sense, you've heard the old adage, when the student is ready, the master appears. We're looking for the students who are ready. And one thing that American Freemasonry made a serious mistake in is when they made the policy decision early on that every man can be a Mason. And so, they forgot to pay attention to the fact that we never have wanted just any man to be a brother among us. We want men to come among us who want to be brothers, and therefore, they want to be initiated into manhood. And so I just think that if we would, and I see some lodges are actually paying a lot more attention to how they're vetting people, have an interest in the fraternity. Another thing is that there's so much information out there now about Freemasonry that those guys who are students and who are ready are discovering us, through the internet. And they're discovering that what we have to offer is what they've been looking for. So that at least increases our chances that men who are actually duly and truly prepared are coming to us more now than they did in the past, just because they have the ability to learn a lot about us through the World Wide Web that they didn't in the past. But only we can do that.
That's right. And we have to do a better job at controlling, or at least making sure we get the right information out there so they have a choice as to what they learn about us. Most puissant, if I could mention to Most Worshipful Bob, Bob, you know, there's 2 states right now represented on the call that will be particularly fearful because of your presentation tonight. One of them is South Dakota. The other one's Minnesota, because both George Bowder and Carl Lidstrom already know that I will incorporate every facet of what you said today into my visit when I see them. And they know, and they're fearful of this because they know how long it already is. And I'll add all of this there.
Right, yeah.
Oh, please. Oh, I'm looking forward to it.
George, are you looking forward to it?
Like a hole in the head.
There you go. There you go. I knew it. I have a following, Bob. It's like
you do.
Just sort of different.
You know, I came to this session because I've had the opportunity over 200 years of life to watch Bob since he was a child, and I enjoy being exposed to him. I'm not sure how it's going to float when it's run through the translation by Bill Snyder. So, Bob, you're welcome to come to South Dakota anytime.
Bob, why don't we go together? We can really confuse them.
It won't take a lot.
I wouldn't have time for both of us in any one meeting.
Yeah, we'll have an invite from Minnesota to follow up on that, you know.
Yeah, I will keep the meeting moving along and extremely short to allow for it. But I know enough to schedule you, Bill, for just before lunch.
Yeah, that people find that's the best. Some say during lunch and everybody leaving. That is sometimes the better one.
You just need to make sure you got one of those long vaudevillian hooks, just in case.
There you go.
Any other questions or comments on the subject? If not, Most Worshipful, I truly appreciate you coming in. It's always a pleasure, not only to see you, but to hear your great thoughts and perspectives on Freemasonry. I look forward to our opportunity to get together in person again and take part in the sacrifice of some leaves and enjoy a good cigar and a scotch together. It's been a long time.
Looking forward to it. Always.
Fellowshipping with you.
Yeah.
Getting into the open discussion part of things, I was asked to speak a little bit about.
Most pleasant.
Yeah. You want me to pause?
I do. Thanks, sir.
The pause makes editing the video a little easier. Steve knows where to stop. It makes the file shorter. Anyway, I was asked to speak a little bit about my perspective on transparency. One of the 3 principles or goals, I guess, that I was working towards or am working towards in my term is transparency, particularly centering around the General Grand Council transparency. I wasn't given a lot of information on exactly what perspective they were wondering about how I feel about transparency, but in my view, I've always had difficulty with organizations where leadership conducted its business within a star chamber or outside the view of its membership. I feel that particularly in Freemasonry, our leaders are chosen to perform a function, to serve the craft for a period of time, and they are custodians of things like our finances and our work and the efforts of building the direction that the craft will take for the period of time that they have been selected to sit there. It's not their own personal position to reflect those things that pertain to them alone. So I have always, a lot of it has to do with my upbringing, but my dad was always a big stickler about finances, and being involved in any organization from church to work to whatever, if you dealt with money, you had to be very open on how you took care of that money. And I believe that the same should be true with us and with General Grand. We are given the honor of receiving per capita from our membership, and we have to be good stewards of that money and provide what services we can for that money that they give us. And we've never really had, I think, strong processes around accounting and documentation of the of how we spend our funds. So what I have committed to in this term is that we're going to be much more open about the money that we bring in, how we spend the money, what we're doing with the money, and what our plans are for the future around finances. It's why we have scheduled a midterm triennial that'll happen in August of 2022 that will be purely focused on the state of the General Grand Council as it relates to financials. We have had some hurdles and barriers that we've had to address. We decided towards the end of towards the end of the last triennial that our current accounting system and processes weren't optimal for how we needed to operate. And we looked at working towards compartmentalizing, I guess, would be a way to look at it, in terms of all of the awards and the programs and stuff like that. We spun off from just being a typical operational cost into program costs, and how can we make these programs self-funding so that they don't actually get involved into our actual operational budgeting process. That way, we just ran out of the last medal for Cryptic Mason of the Year, so you pulled a short straw, your budget is now going to be dinged for the next 3 triennials because we buy these things in bulk, and so sucks to be you, your budget gets out of whack. Putting these things in programs where they're accounted for separately as a program, it takes those unexpected variations out of the equation and allows you to focus and make your budget specifically to your needs to supervise the craft. We decided to move away from the QuickBooks Online version to a standalone version. We changed our accounting categories completely, and we've had some difficulties getting that going. But I can say that we've made recent big strides in getting that all corrected. We've been working very diligently. And when I say we, it's Steve Balke, Chuck Holland, Chuck McCullum, and our internal auditor, Dustin Verdi, who is a forensic accountant. And they have been working very closely together to get the systems up and running so that we can start getting out the reports. Once we get to the point where our financial reports are coming out on a regular basis, I will not have any hesitation to provide those reports to anybody that is interested in seeing them. We'll be happy to take questions on any of that at this meeting, at the regional recorders meetings, at the regional deputies meetings. We are accountable to our membership, and in order to allow for that accountability, we have to provide you with the information. To date, we have failed on that. I will be the first to admit that. But while we have failed to meet where we wanted to be, we have during the entire time been working diligently trying to get to the point where we can meet that accountability standard. So I apologize for where we're at now, but I will be extremely happy for our near-term future in getting that information out and available to you. I hope that kind of addressed my concept of what I view as transparent. The other aspect of transparency, as I see it too, is I want you guys to feel my pain. So when I'm having a difficult time with an area, or if there are barriers in my way, I will not hesitate to let our membership know. It's like, look, we are trying to accomplish a thing, but we're being blocked, or we've run into difficulties. And I am of the opinion that there should be no secrets. If you don't want to look bad, don't do stuff that is bad. We should all work together as a team, whether or not we're within an organization or we're in multiple organizations. We all have to remember first and foremost that we're Masons. We have to work like Masons, and we have to support and protect one another. But I do believe in open communication, and that goes with the good and the bad. I don't ever wish to be disrespectful to anyone or anything, but I will always be honest. And many people frequently disagree with my perspectives on things, and I'm okay with that. And I will always listen to their differing perspective and opinions, and sometimes it changes my own. But you can't have that if you don't put yourself out there, if you don't transact honestly. And to me, honesty and transparency go hand in hand. So that's it in a nutshell. If does anybody have any questions or comments on any of that? Wow. Love the quiet guys. Wayne, did that kind of cover what you were wondering about, or not to intentionally call you out, but I don't know any other way to ask you. You keep putting yourself on mute. There you go.
Okay, I think you answered it very fairly. The only thing that I personally would maybe ask of everybody is transparency not us as a men's fraternity to establish transparency between our ritual work and our membership? Is it not hand in hand in our association as we were talking men and then brothers next?
I'm not sure I understand about the ritual and transparency. Maybe elaborate on it a little bit more. I think I missed the point. You're on mute again, Wayne.
Okay.
There you go.
Are we there?
Yeah.
Okay. Does not the ritual give us the more or less the exact route to achieve what we want in cryptic masonry? Is it not the responsibility for all of us to stay on that same path?
No, I think in a perfect world, it's like, yes, I think we should all be as transparent as possible. But, you know, I think people's perspective of what should and should not be publicly available varies. I mean, there's obviously things and discussions that we have at the General Grand Council level that are not public, not that they need to be secret, but we have an obligation to protect a person's situation, a personal situation, or, you know, it might deal with a very sensitive issue. But it's not something that necessarily affects the craft in and of itself. I hope that kind of answers what you're saying, but anybody else wants to jump in on that? I don't know that I'm quite hitting the mark there, Wayne, and I apologize for that. I don't know.
No, it was just, it's my perspective of what transparency is between, let's say, companion to companion to brother to brother. That's what I was more focused on than the financial end of it. And that's most of it, I guess, is what I was trying to, I guess, weasel out of you. Okay.
No. And as I hear you, it all goes back to, you know, are we meeting on the level, you know, and that's dealing as equals and dealing openly and honestly with one another. And yes, from that perspective, I agree with you 100%. That should always be the case.
I thank you for your courtesy extended to all of us.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. So, other than that, you know, anybody have any questions at all for me or Bill or Steve or any of the other, John who's on here?
Just forget my face.
That's it.
Dude, that it's just burned right here. Go ahead.
Just a very informative session. I enjoyed this today. Thank you.
No, it's been a great session. I messaged a couple of people. I think this episode of the Fireside Chat was a home run. You know, I have such great respect for Most Worshipful Bob and his knowledge of our craft, both historically and how it works within our own organizations. And I was so grateful that he agreed at such short notice to do this presentation. And I look forward to having him back again at whatever time he'd like to jump in. You've always got just so much to share, and it's always a great time to be with you, sir. So anything else for tonight? If not, can
you look at chat?
I'm working on it. Where am I looking at? Okay. John Huth, the Provisional Ritual. As far as I know, we're going to be trying to, and if I'm answering this in an incorrect fashion, let me know. But the ritual that we have out now, which is a Provisional Ritual, we will be attempting to ratify that at the first session of the triennial, which will be held on August 14th in Minneapolis, at the same time when the Knight Templar, the Grand Encampments Triennial will be starting. They have been gracious enough to allow us to have some time during their sessions, and we're going to be there on Friday the 13th and Saturday the 14th with our business session on the 14th. So that's when the provisional ritual should be finalized. That doesn't mean that there won't be more changes coming down the road, but we do need to get it finalized so people can commit to it one way or the other, and we can move on to future versions of it. Steve, did you want to add anything to that?
Thank you, General Grandmaster. Actually, yes, it is the intention, is continuing to be the intention that this is an inclusive ritual where it can be. What does that mean? John, if you don't get offended, I hope you won't get offended, but I'm going to use Arizona as the example here. They actually do their opening differently. And I don't know exactly where it is, but if we can include it as optional, if you've got the provisional ritual, you'll see Ahishar's soliloquy. And if we can include it as optional for our constituent, our affiliate grand councils, so that it is a more useful reference, we have attempted to do that, and we continue to attempt. I will say this, if you want it to hit the floor, the sooner you get us that information as to where it would be an optional addition, the better, because this has to get out to everybody as soon as possible. I'm looking at distribution of the resolutions on the General Grandmaster, the 14th of March. Is that correct?
Yes.
14th of March. So if you want this to be considered, I'm not saying the 14th of March, but it's a general grand session. If you want people to be in favor of it, get it to them as fast as possible so they could talk about it. Thank you, General Grandmaster.
Not Massachusetts. I'm getting confused between being have a split personality here, but New York is publishing that soliloquy as an optional piece of work.
Wonderful.
No, I really have liked the direction that we took with this latest version of the ritual, because with all these optional rubrics, so to speak, of the different, they come from the different regions or jurisdictions, it adds to the educational value of the ritual book, and it also allows for jurisdictions to tailor their ritual in a way that, while staying true to what is necessary for the cryptic rite, they have enough variability in there that this works better for us than this does. And so I think it's a great process. And Mike Smithson's hand is up. Mike, go ahead.
Yes. We have a ritual we use here in Washington that's been approved by us, and I sent copies into General Grand a long time ago, but I never heard back whether or not they approve or disapprove it.
Did it have your name on it?
Had Washington on it, yes.
They disapproved it then. I don't know, Steve, does that ring a bell to you? I don't remember us talking about it, but I wasn't really part of it. Or it's also completely possible that it may have gotten lost with the ritual committee at the time. But
General Grandmaster, what happened was when we took in from, you know what, let me back up one. General Grand Master, I think his question was whether or not we approved the ritual. I would say that there isn't an approval at this point. Perhaps the deputy or you would chime in on that part, but go ahead.
Well, as far as if the original request was, here's Washington's cryptic ritual, will you approve it as General Grand Council? That's not for our approval. That would be up for your Grand Council to approve it. We would certainly be more than happy to make comment on it, but given your sovereignty as we have it set up in the American York Rite system in the United States, that's your prerogative.
General Grandmaster, I think you now would be whether or not their ritualistic practice is in conformance with the landmarks, and since they were chartered after 1881, I think that is something that we could give acknowledgement to, that their ritual is not inconsistent with the landmarks.
Right.
So
that's all I needed to make sure we're still within the parameters.
Right. No, I think we can get that. I'm just sitting here going, Steve, see if you can find that email.
No, I'll do that. I can't.
It was before Steve's time, I can tell you that.
Understood. Yeah. Okay. So if you can resend it.
yeah, that's what I was going to recommend is resend it, and I mean you're good to go. I can't imagine you guys in Washington going completely out in left field.
No,
but if you do want any feedback from us or anything like that, please send it, because we'd love to see it. And again, going back to this idea of and concept of including optional ritual off of the standard. Here's what was originally created by General Grand. There may be aspects of it that can be incorporated into our own ritual books.
General Grand Master, the Paul Harvey of the question in wholly is that Washington was one of the 4 rituals provided that we'll call it an adjunct ritual committee when we put together the provisional, and then when the trustees went through almost line by line the provisional, that was one of the references. I'm pretty sure, Mike, the answer to your question is no, you don't go outside the landmarks. Yes, your ritual is just fine, because we actually used Washington as a reference. And I can say that with certainty because the General Grand Chaplain also provided it when we were going through that process. So
we have insiders watching you guys.
But absolutely, please do send me that, and we will get you back the targeted answer rather than Morpheus.
We had a distinct, since we're so close to the previous most illustrious, or most puissant, I should say. It was across the border, handed, type deal. And we never heard back. And we said, hey, wait a minute. We need to get this, make sure we're clean, make sure we're on the right side.
You need his address?
No, we got his address.
Okay, anything else, guys? If not, I'm going to ask companion Rodney Middleton to give us a closing prayer, and we'll send us all home in safe fashion.
Sorry, guys, I took a minute to find it, but dear Lord, as we continue on with the what we're doing with masonry and especially with the General Grant Council, please, Lord, watch over each one of us. Do your will, Lord. Keep us all safe, especially with the COVID that's going on and all the tragedies that have been going on with all those that have lost their life. We ask that your blessing to help our leaders as they make some difficult decisions in the future, especially with finances and membership, and helping each one of us out. We just thank you for the blessings you have bestowed upon us and the future blessings you will bestow upon us in the future. In your holy name, we ask this in your holy name. Amen.
Again, Bob, thank you so much for being with us today. I hope to see you again soon.
Thank you, most blessed.
I look forward to seeing everybody again on March, what is it? It'll be March 28th.
That's Palm Sunday. Does that create a problem?
Probably should. How about the 21st? How does that sound?
I mean, from my point of view, it's fine, but it's,
No, it's a holy weekend, so. Yeah, so Steve, can you please make sure that everything's accounted for Sunday the 21st?
I will make sure that everything is accounted for. I have a previous obligation on the 21st of March.
Okay. That's a personal one or a Masonic one?
Masonic one.
Okay. Is it one I was obligated to that I don't have in my calendar yet?
No, I was asked by the Daughters of the Nile to do their Zoom installation, Zoom stuff for their installation. So it might be done by then, but I doubt it seriously.
Okay, no worries. Just make sure that we get it scheduled and that there's no conflict on the Zoom channels. With that, I bid everybody adieu. I wish you all the best of health and may God bless you all and keep you safe. Stay warm.
Thank you. Same to you.
Thank you, General Grant Master.
Ciao.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.